All right, ladies and gents, I have my friend Aum Gandhi here. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, I got it. Cool, man. Well, so you said that we were just chatting just super briefly before this, and you said you got a big dance tomorrow. So tell me what's going on tomorrow, man.
Yeah, so I'm doing my fifth 100 miler tomorrow. It's my sixth attempt, going for number five. It's the Santa Monica Samo 100,
Okay.
and I'm super stoked for that one because I'm SoCal born and raised, so it's a home turf race. And of course, doing it for the same charity I am, which we know we can dive into.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's about 101 miles, 17,000 feet of gain, and 31 hours to do it. So it's going to be a fun little dance.
Okay. Okay. Sounds easy on paper for an ultra runner like you and me, but as we know, things can go wrong. Like everything has to go right in order for this to happen. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling pretty good. Um, Everything has to go right, but as we both know as ultra runners, things always go wrong, and it's all about adapting and moving forward. And at the end of the day, I'm just excited to be able to get up and do this again and enjoy the process and just be a part of this amazing community.
Nice. And you've never done this race before?
No, this is the inaugural year that they're doing this race,
Ah,
so
okay.
this will be first for them and first for me.
Nice. Well, that's pretty exciting. Um, so one day before your 100 miler. So walk us through your day today. I'm curious, like, are you eating certain foods, drinking lots of fluids, keeping off your feet? Are you going to go to bed early? Like, what's it all look like?
So I would say the days leading up to it, just doing a lot of shakeout runs, getting on the bike, definitely drinking a lot of fluids, throwing some liquid IV in there and getting that extra salt and electrolytes in and letting myself put on a couple of pounds during taper because I'm going to need all of that extra storage and not being afraid to carb up and just trying to get to bed early and banking that sleep. And I got a 2 a.m. wake up call tomorrow, so I'm going to try to be in bed by 8 o'clock today. Even if, as we both know, like there's a lot of tossing and turning, just trying to get a couple hours is always good.
Yeah, yeah. So are you getting up at 2 because you have to drive to the race, or what's that all about?
Yeah, so the race is about an hour and 15 minutes away from me. I call it a local race.
Sure.
But yeah, I got to be up at 2 o'clock, get out of the house by 2:30, 2:40, and just do my bib pickup and throw in my drop bag. And then we got a 5 a.m. start.
Sweet. Well, good luck, man. It sounds awesome. I'll be following along. I follow you on Instagram, and I'll be checking it out, man. It sounds exciting.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Tell me about the charity that you run for. It looks like Richstone Family Center. How long have you been trying to raise money for them? And tell us how it all works.
So Richstone Family is a local organization in LA that focuses on preventing child abuse, domestic violence, and generational trauma. But what I like about them compared to a lot of other charities that do similar things is that they not only help the kids, they support the entire family. So their goal is to adopt the entire family. And this is usually a lower income bracket, essential workers, to help the parents break their own generational trauma and also provide services to support the kids aged anywhere from like 3, 4, 5 years old to high school.
Hmm.
And I've known Richstone and its volunteers and its staff for 5, 6 years. I circled back to raising money for them through charity about it's been about 7 months now, and I did a 72-hour race for them last December, and we raised $2,600 on a $2,500 goal. So this
Nice.
year I'm shooting for $25,000 with my schedule of races, and excited to see what we can all do together.
Wow. Well, that's some lofty goals, but it's all for a good cause, it sounds like. What made you pick this particular charity? Is this something that you have personal experience with, or how did that work out?
So, growing up, me and my family, we kind of struggle with that, kind of struggle with poverty and struggle with, my parents struggle with their own generational trauma. And I learned very quickly that your parents can only give you what they have. And I love my parents. And, you know, I, these are just things that I have struggled with growing up, and my parents also struggle with growing up. So I love seeing what they're doing for, just for the local community. And yeah, man, like it's really heavy, and it's just something I really resonate with, and it gives me a why and a purpose beyond myself for something that I've been through myself, and something that me, my parents, and my family have been through together.
Mm.
And I always maintain that, these kids and these families don't have a choice, but running is a chosen pain that we can use to change the world and leave a positive impact.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well put. Have you, I guess we're just diving right into the hard questions. Have you had personal
Yeah.
experience with like domestic violence or anything like that? I mean, it sounds like that's what this charity sort of helps with. And you mentioned like generational trauma, which I understand what that is, and I know that's a very real thing. But did you have experience with domestic violence in your household growing up, or what was that like?
Yeah, there was a bit of domestic violence in the household. A lot of the abuse was very verbal and a lot of manipulation. And there was just a lot of me realizing that, like your parents want the best for you, and your family wants the best for you, but they can only give you what they have. And realizing that, my grandparents were kind of a step above them in that trauma ladder as well, and that the buck kind of had to stop somewhere.
Mhm.
So yeah, there were experiences with manipulation, like experiences with domestic abuse, just generational trauma, and uh, verbal abuse, some physical abuse. And these are just things that I heavily resonate with,
Mhm.
again, because it's a lot of times it's not just a lot of times these charities don't tackle the root of the issue. And I think a lot of the times the root of the issue is the entire family unit as opposed to one piece of it.
Mm-hmm. And so this place, the Richstone Family Center, you said adopts a whole family rather than just the children.
Correct.
So that's pretty interesting. So are they putting parents through certain classes or courses, or giving them certain resources to break this generational trauma?
Yes, absolutely. They have services in like counseling. They have services and just uh, they're very intuitive in like the kind of resources that the people in this community need, especially when we're talking about the difference between maybe somebody in the middle class or a higher bracket versus
Mhm.
essential workers like my parents. My mom and my dad both work like steel toe jobs, and they couldn't always be there for me, because they were trying to put a roof over my head, which
Mhm.
was their way of showing love.
Of
Um,
course.
so, like they're very intuitive in helping families who are going through similar things like that and don't always have the time but need the resources and the support, almost like an extended arm, to help them uh, create this, to solidify the foundation of their family units.
Mm-hmm. Did you grow up in California?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I lived in Los Angeles for the first 13, 14 years of my life, and then moved to Orange County in high school. So about half and half. I'm 28 now.
Nice. Okay. And how about your parents? Were they born and raised in California, or were they immigrants, or what's their story?
My parents were immigrants. So my grandpa came over here in the 80s, and eventually my mom married my dad, and she came over in the early 90s.
Okay.
So my parents are immigrants from India.
Okay. Okay. And I like the term steel-toed job. I don't know if I've ever heard that, but it certainly resonates, and I get it. So I'm picturing that like working in factories, just trying to find like the best paying manual labor jobs so that they can keep a roof over their head. Is that kind of what it looked like?
Correct. Yeah, my dad
Yeah.
has worked multiple warehouse jobs. At one point, he was doing three jobs. Like he was the guy who takes jumpers down, and he's working a laundromat. He was also working as a UPS driver,
Mm.
and then he's had many hats in his life. And my mom as well was a resident nurse on a night shift for many years, and she also worked as a steel toe worker in the warehouse as well. So a lot of blue collar work for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Are your folks still around?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yep. My mom and my dad are still around. I also have a younger sister, 22.
Okay. How's your family feel about all this crazy ultra marathon running that you're doing?
Oh man. My dad is sinking his toes into it. My mom, I don't think she likes it in a lot of ways, but I think she's respecting it. But it's almost kind of like a mom's intuition for like the pain and like caring, and um yeah, so they've come to respect it though, and they really are proud of what I'm doing, and there's this mutual respect and love for each other now.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, let's begin to sort of peel the layers back. Tell me about how you grew up and what that looked like and how you eventually discovered running. I took a peek at your ultra sign up, and it doesn't look like you've been running for a decade or decades or anything like that. It looks like just a couple years maybe. So yeah, just tell me how the story unfolded.
Yeah, so from a physical standpoint, I didn't come from an athletic background. I actually was in remedial PE almost every year, which is like the PE that they put you in when you couldn't pass the fitness test. I was the last kid on the track. I come from a family that is generationally on my dad's side been like diabetic. And after 7, 8 years old, I was pretty much obese up until I was 18, weighed almost 250 pounds, and
Oh.
went through this whole journey of like kind of losing that weight. Oh, sorry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
you just
shoot.
cut off for a minute there.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I,
But yeah, like there was a kind of lost all that weight when I was 18. Had a bit of a scare. 18 was a pivotal point for me where I had kind of a scare where the doctor told me that I was pre-diabetic, and I thought I was going to end up kind of next in line to just live that lifestyle. And that was kind of the tipping point where I started losing weight over the course of 2 years, but I became almost unhealthily skinny.
Mhm.
I used to just exercise a lot and eat very little, and gained all that weight back in my adult years and fell heavily again into a depression. And about 4 years ago, I picked up running as a means of mental health as opposed to physical health. And it started with this day that I always remember where I ran a quarter of a mile and I walked back home nauseated and just like tired, and started asking myself like, man, maybe I could run 5 minutes straight. Maybe I could run 10 minutes straight. Maybe I could do 30. And it was just conquering one Everest after another, doing the 5K, doing the 10K, half marathon. And eventually that during the pandemic, that ended up leading to ultra marathons. And I committed to my first 100 miler when I'd only done 16 miles at once. And it's just been this thing of like seeing what's next after that, and just also being propelled forward by doing it for a higher purpose.
Yeah. 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 That's sort of interesting. Like you decided to do it for a higher purpose rather than for yourself. Like a lot of people get into this thing as sort of a means to, I don't know, flex on Instagram or to say I was the guy who did the thing, you know, and that's not necessarily a bad reason to start doing these things. Like that gets you into it and gets you moving forward. So I'm not necessarily against that, but it seems like you dove into the trying to raise money for charities like almost right away.
Yeah, it's even before I reconnected with Richstone Family, there was every single ultra marathon. My first 100 miler was for a food drive in LA where we raised enough money for 1,500 hot meals. I did a 24-hour race after that for a COVID crisis in India that happened last April, which my grandmother was affected by. So there was always like a higher purpose related to it. And I think a lot of that came from reading Rich Roll's book and Finding Ultra, and also reading up on Jay Shetty and just kind of the Dalai Lama on how altruism is the key to happiness. And I've always just been doing things for charity, and ultras always seem like a powerful tool for me to have a bigger impact. That being said, though, I think there's different levels to it. There's the higher purpose aspect, and there's also like the personal aspect of like, how much more can I do? Like how much farther can I push my physical limits? And also just on an interpersonal level, just showing other people that like, hey, like I wasn't the most athletic guy in the room, but if you show up every day, then you can also do these amazing things and conquer your Everest.
Yeah, 100%, man. I've said on this podcast a million times that after I finished my first 100 miler, I didn't feel like I'm awesome and I did this awesome thing. I thought we as human beings are amazing and we can do whatever it is we want to do. Like I finally made the connection that you can do whatever you put your mind to. Like I'd heard that a million times, but I finally made that connection. So, yeah, anybody can do this stuff. You know, might be harder for some folks to get the ball rolling if they're overweight or have other handicaps or disabilities, but we can do whatever we want. It's 100% true. So let's go back. So you said you were 250 pounds until you were 18 years old. So, I mean, how did you get that big? Like, I mean, obviously you weren't eating properly and you weren't exercising, but I mean, would you put some of the blame on family lifestyle, or was it just, yeah, what did that look like?
I think a lot of it does come from several factors, such as like, I'd say the biggest factor was finding out what depression was at a very early age. I was 9 years old and I started to kind of feel those ebb and flows, and I didn't know how to describe it. I'd be asked like, why are you unhappy? And I'd say, I don't know, you know? And a common problem in American culture is that fast food is very cheap. And it's very accessible and easy. So I definitely fell into the addiction of like having fast food, like burritos, and just like my favorite was like Del Taco and just like In and Out. And I just kind of fell down that rabbit hole. And over time, as things got tougher, you know, I was bullied a lot in high school and middle school for various reasons, like my obesity, for speech therapy, for my ethnicity. And as those things got to me and I became more outcasted, I started turning to food for comfort. And my weight just sort of skyrocketed as a result of that until I got to that 250 weight when I was 18. And that's sort of how it got to that.
So I'm just trying to picture like, and I don't mean to be coarse by asking these questions, but like, was your family also into the fast food culture, or were you eating fast food on the side of your family? Like when you as a kid were out, or like, I understand the eating food as a means of comfort and that sort of being your drug. Like, were you hiding and eating, or was it just like a slow accumulation and all of a sudden you stepped on a scale and like, holy crap, like I'm a big guy.
No, no, I definitely knew I was big and I was definitely insecure about it. It
Okay.
definitely ballooned when I was like 16 to 18, but
Mm.
it was definitely kind of the habits that were built up over time. So background with my dad's family and my mom's families, they both had their own ways of showing love with food. My mom grew up very poor. Um, our family wasn't very well off up until I was about 8, 9, maybe 10 years old. And so in that culture, kind of like food is a way of like showing that prosperity, you know.
Hmm.
And on my dad's side, it was a lot of like, you know, live life and just eat food and enjoy everything, enjoy all the comforts. And that was sort of those mentalities that sort of combined to kind of help me get into that food addiction. But I would say that a lot of it was just my own depression and finding some means for comfort because there was no other way for me to express myself.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't know how to express myself and I didn't know where to turn to because there was just bullying on one side and just kind of that Asian culture of like be a man on the other side. And food just kind of became the means of um, just like coping.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. Um, and depression is also a fickle subject, and I understand it, and I've had my experiences with it. Um, have you ever gotten to the root of where that depression came from, or was that from body images and being bullied in school, or um, have you ever sought therapy out to sort of dig into that, or what does that look like now?
I've
I know
definitely
that's a lot of questions there.
well, to start off, I've definitely sought therapy out, and I know that it's something that definitely doesn't work for me as well as like the self-reflection of running does. But of course, everyone is different, and I recommend that everybody at least give therapy a shot
Mhm.
and see if it works for you. Um, I think the root of that depression probably came from if I had to if I had to think of one place where it probably came from, it was kind of like neither belonging here nor there, which is a common problem that immigrant kids have, where it's like I go to India and I'm too American to fit in with them. I'm here in the States and I'm too Indian to fit in with everyone here. And that's
Mhm.
also minorities too. I think one subject that is also very fickle and underlooked by the media is minority on minority racism. My parents were guilty of it too. Like, look at those blacks, look at those Asians. They were also doing the same thing to us, but it's kind of like a fear of that unknown. Um, but I think it was I think that would probably be the place where it started. It was just like
Mm.
not fitting in and not understanding why I didn't fit in, and
Mm.
also just living in this nice community when and going to this good school when we weren't when we weren't well off. So not fitting in with the kids who lived a better lifestyle growing up. So there was a lot of that for sure.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's a tough place to start from, to start your young adult years from it's almost a disadvantage, you're starting with depression and trying to work your way up, and yeah, that's tough, man.
And then and
Um
then and then to add to that, being ostracized early for being in that because kids are kids, so know how to they don't quite know how to understand or cope with like a kid who's different. So there's also like being in remedial PE, being in speech therapy early. Um, those things didn't quite help me get closer to kids, if that makes sense.
yeah, 100%. you know like I think back to my childhood, and I was bullied a little bit, and I struggled with trying to fit in a little bit, but I was also just kind of a knuckleheaded kid who also bullied other kids, who also didn't let other kids fit in for whatever reason, and it's like, I, I don't know if I was just a kid being a kid. Like, I almost hate to admit that. And some of the things that I did and said to people, when I think back, I just shudder thinking about them. Like, I feel really bad about it, but I've also had those things done to me. So like, I understand both ends of it. I just wasn't smart enough to think it through, to think ahead, to think how this person's going to feel and how I'm going to feel about myself a week later after saying this and watching the repercussions of hurting someone's feelings. And yeah, I mean, kids are just kids. It sucks being a kid. It's growing
Yeah.
up is tough.
And I mean, for sure, like I can't rid myself of a lot of the guilt as well of like saying things to other kids when like I just thought like, hey, this is my chance to fit in, let me say this thing to another kid.
Yeah.
I did have a few instances like that. I had a few instances like that were created by my image that was put in my head of like what other minorities are like before I actually learned my lesson. So yeah, kids will be kids, we do those things to each other, and all we can do is learn from it.
Yeah. And that's the important part. Okay. So you're 18 years old. You step on the scale and it's 250s and you decide you want to start losing weight. So what did that look like?
It honestly just started with me. It was a lot of trial and error. It started with me just getting outside and just biking and walking and doing whatever I could. And it was definitely not a linear process. The first 10, 12 pounds took longer than I would have expected it to. Mm-hmm. And then there was a phase where I quit fast food pretty much cold turkey. And I started just having just like Whole Foods and like, there was this place where I went to like a major extreme where like I was having nothing but like raw food and whole food and like no sodium at all, to the point where I remember going to the doctor and she's like, you need more salts. Mm-hmm. But there was just a lot of experimenting in that phase, and also just going to college, becoming more active. I didn't have my own car until I was maybe like 20. So there was a lot of like walking to the bus stop, walking around campus, playing basketball for 4 or 5 hours, which was just running back and forth. And then also developing this unhealthy mindset of like, I need to be in a deficit all the time. This unhealthy mindset of like, I ate this food, or I ate this snack and I need to go out and play basketball, or like go do some exercise for 2-3 hours, or vice versa. Like I didn't exercise that much. All I did was my normal walk today, and I'm just going to have like some nuts and like some coconut water or something.
Mm. And this was all at the age of like 18, 19, something like that?
Yeah, it was a process that took place over about a year and a half. And I ended up going from about 250 pounds to about 165. And that was like pure, like no muscle. That was just like losing all this like weight, having like all this loose fat, which I still do, like stretch marks, and still kind of looking into the mirror and still only seeing the fat, which is another thing that I've started to become more vocal about recently, which is body dysmorphia.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I've been doing this podcast for, almost a few years, 2.5 years or so. And so I've had a lot of cool conversations with folks. And I think this is starting to come up more and more with men. Just having, body image issues and food issues. And, this used to be primarily like something that was big with the women, but I'm hearing more and more guys talk about this. And it's funny, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? I went for a bike ride with a buddy of mine, And we had a great conversation, and he started telling me about how when he was in college, he ended up in a psychotic episode where once he was out on his own and he was a young man at college and could kind of do what he wanted, he found himself just going to the cafeteria and eating just tons and tons of food, and then just wandering around in a daze and going to a restaurant and just eating tons and tons of food, and just completely spun out and ended up in a psychiatric hospital, you know? And it just is kind of mind blowing to me that more and more people, especially men, are coming out and talking about this. And I mean, there is a fair amount of pressure put on us as men to look a certain way, whether it's through TV, movies, advertisements. So when you were initially trying to lose this weight, what was your motivation behind it? And I'm guessing that at that age, it was like kind of a selfish motivation, like to get girls or to look like so-and-so or whatever. And in no judgment there, because like I said, that gets the ball rolling, and that's kind of how things start.
Yeah, definitely. That was part of the motivators for sure. And even in my throughout my childhood and my teenage years, even throughout other failed attempts to lose weight, it was always as a result of reasons like that. Because as a kid, as a teenager, what do you want more than to like just fit in, you know? Mm-hmm. When I was 18, I think the thing that was different and that helped me actually lose that weight was that it was more because of shell shock. It was like the shocking look in the mirror when the doctor told me that, like, you know, you're pre-diabetic, you're going to become a diabetic if you don't stop. And just realizing that I need to take my foot off the gas and really just like pivot around here and start losing weight, or I'm going to be living this kind of life that, you know, my dad has, my grandpa has, like my great grandpa has, and I kind of just break this chain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that takes a certain amount of guts too, to sort of just step in and say, I'm going to be the end to this generational trauma. You know, like you said, our parents just kind of have what they have, and they give us what they have to offer, and that's it. And the same thing with their parents and their parents. And then whether that's unhealthy food decisions or alcoholism or domestic violence and abuse, sometimes that just carries down generation after generation. And as much as we said, I'm not going to be like my dad or my grandpa or whatever the case is, you find yourself falling into that trap quite often. And it takes guts to say that the buck stops here. This is it. We're gonna change things from here on out. And you know, whether I have kids or not, like, I'm not going to suffer from this anymore. I am going to do something about this. And that takes a certain amount of guts, man. I commend you.
I appreciate it.
For sure. So you lost the weight, and then, but it sounds like it wasn't done in the healthiest way. How did things sort of shake out after that?
So the weight started slowly kind of piling back on after it hit 165, to the point where I was back to 185 when I was just about graduating college. Then I started going into, I was a civil engineer, so I was going into private sector work where I was working long hours and overtime, and wasn't doing as active as I was in college, and started falling into the rut of depression again due to a variety of things that were going on in my life. And just things just kind of like ballooned again, including my weight. My weight went back up to 220 in 2019. And that was the point. In 2018, actually, was when I picked up running again. So it was 4 years ago where I picked up running again. Okay. And that was for, like I said earlier, for mental health reasons as opposed to physical reasons, even though you might expect that it was something I'd pick up again because I gained weight. It was actually for a mental health reason.
Mm. How did you have that notion that running was going to help you with your mental health? For me personally, I started running for physical health and realized that running was helping me with my mental health. It was kind of like, and I feel like that's probably the way that most people experience it. But it sounds like you in the beginning were like, I need to do something to be happy. I need to boost my endorphins. And so I'm going to go out and exercise. How did you have that sort of foresight?
The truth is that I actually didn't know. I didn't know if running was going to help me, but I also didn't know where else to turn,
Mm.
because I was working those long hours, and a lot of the exercise I had to do was could not be co-ed with other people because it was later at night, and it had to be something simple. So it was either going to be walking or it was going to be running. And my friend had recently signed up for the NYC marathon, and was my coworker at the time signed up for the NYC marathon and had started running towards that. And I started thinking about this half marathon, but I wasn't totally sure at that moment. So I started looking at a 5K, and that's when a lot of issues were starting to culminate as well, such as the depression was at an all-time high again. I had just had a panic attack at work over basically losing hundreds of thousands of dollars on a $1 million, like, I was a civil engineer, so it was a transportation project. So I'd had a panic attack at work. My dad was out of a job, so there was also the financial side. And just a bunch of things were kind of culminating at that moment, and I just needed to find an outlet because it seems to be, it's kind of a recurring theme now that I think about it, where like, I don't know, for men and for my life in general, where like, I didn't know where to turn. So I had to find this other outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And running ended up being that outlet.
Mm-hmm. And why running? Why not go to therapy or start taking antidepressants or take up volleyball or water polo? Like, why did you hone in on running? Were you, was that the time you read Rich Roll's book, or were you inspired by something else? I'm always just curious, like, why people zero in on running.
I think just the simplicity of it, just
Mm-hmm.
realizing that you don't need anything but a pair of shoes to go out and
Yeah.
run, as
Yeah.
opposed to with water polo, you need the gear, and with volleyball, you
Mm-hmm.
need the gear, and therapy costs money. But running is something you can just put your shoes on and just get out the door no matter what time it is. And I did watch a documentary at the time, which implanted the seed of ultras in me way earlier than I actually started running ultras, called REI How to Run a 100.
Okay.
I watched that documentary, and at the time, I didn't even consider the fact, I didn't even look in that direction and think I'm ever going to do this.
Right.
But I thought to myself, but I think I more thought to myself of like, I resonated with the souls in that movie, of how happy they were with this achievement, how happy they were during the process. And maybe I didn't realize that at the time, but
Mm.
I watched that documentary, and first thing I thought was, man, this is for superhumans and demigods. I'm never going to do this. But they seem to be having a lot of fun running. So maybe I'll give my own little thing a shot, like just go out and see what I can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool, man. And honestly, when I ask that question to people, so many people say just for the simplicity of it, like, everybody's got a junky pair of Target running shoes that they can put on and they can go out the door or whatever, And so
Totally.
it's just easy. You don't have to buy a $4,000 mountain bike to go out and try this new sport. It's the easiest, most simple thing you can do is just, head out the door and go for it.
It's,
So,
it's simple. It's simple. It's for everybody, and it doesn't matter who you are and where you come from.
And if you can't run, if you're too big to run, get out and walk,
Yeah.
walk around the block, walk a mile, walk a half mile, walk a mile, and then eventually throw in just, jog from one block to the next and then walk the rest of that mile. You don't have to run
Oh,
the
I
whole
started.
thing.
That's how I got from a quarter mile to where I am now. It's just run, walk, run, walk.
Totally. So here's how I'm picturing you. Tell me if I'm wrong at this point in your life. You're working a full-time job as a civil engineer, and then at nighttime, you're going out and doing this training sort of on your own. Like, I'm just picturing the romanticism of a man like tired from a long day at work and going out when it's dark out and sort of hammering out these miles. And another thing is when people are sort of overweight, they don't like to go out and run in public or in the daytime because of, body shame issues, or they're worried about how they look. And so a lot of people start either on a treadmill or doing it at night. Again, that's how I'm picturing this. I could be
No,
completely off, but
you're right. No, that was definitely one of the factors for sure. Like I would always do my runs, not only out of necessity early in the morning or at night, but because of that insecurity of the way I looked when I was doing it. And that insecurity kind of went away over time.
mm-hmm. Good. And it should, man, because I'm not necessarily a big overweight guy, but if I were to see someone that's overweight out on the trails or running, I'm always like, dude, I'll cross the street to fist bump this person because it's twice as hard for them to get out the door and do it as it is for me. Like, I just understand and have a certain level of empathy where I can say, all right, nice work, dude. Like, you're doing it. Like, don't feel bad about yourself. Don't overthink this. You might be on the beginning of this journey, or you might be on the roller coaster version of this journey, but just keep at it. Like, when I see those people, I'm just like more proud almost.
And I appreciate that you do that, because I try to just give a nod and a thumbs up and everything, because we all started from someplace and we all have our own journeys, and we have nothing to gain by putting other people down in our own lives. So better to just encourage each other and lift each other up. And yeah, when I see something like that, especially on the trails, I just love to show love to it and just support and just smiles and happiness.
Yeah, 100%. So was your first race back in those days a 5K?
Yeah, so my first official race was a 5K with maybe like 10 participants in August of 2018.
Okay.
Not much fanfare, I just drove there, did the thing, and I drove home. And then there was, around the time I finished that 5K, this is kind of a recurring theme in my life. When I started my running journey, is just picking these colossal Everest-like goals and figuring out the rest on the way. So at the time when I finished my 5K, my chosen colossal goal was doing the Joshua Tree half marathon, which was going to be in November. And I remember just like sweating bullets over it. I'm like, dude, you just did 3 miles. Like, how are you going to go out and do 13? And it's just like, oh, you're going to have to figure this out, man.
Yes. Yeah. I love it, man. I mean, yeah, I was the same way. Like I've said again on this podcast, that when I trained for my first half marathon, it was like I was training for war or something. I was training to go into a serious battle. And I just remember going out and doing my first 10-mile run at night. And I was just like, no matter what, if I die, I'm going to finish 10 miles tonight,
Exactly.
And that's how it all starts. Yeah. Okay. So 5K, you skipped the 10K, went to half marathon.
I did end up doing a 10K in between, but I committed to the half marathon before I kind of did the in-between stuff, which is a total recurring theme with like how I set up my big goals.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's how we get it done, right? Like hit the button on the computer that says enter, and I'm signed up for this race that I'm super scared of. And here we go. Now I have to sign up for a shorter race a couple months before that as training, I've been there.
Exactly.
For those first few races, were you still trying to lose weight, or had the weight come off at that point?
The weight didn't really start coming off until maybe like 2020, actually. I didn't
Oh,
think too much about it.
oh,
Um, I got to the weight slowly came off over time. So I was 220 at the time, and about early 2020, right as the lockdown hit, I was probably close to like 195. And then when I started getting into more miles and more trails and just like increasing the workload, my weight started chipping off to the point where I got closer to where I am right now, which is about 166,
okay.
165.
Nice. Do you feel like you're in a healthy place now? I mean, do you feel like you're putting healthy food in your body? You aren't just all skin and bones. You have a little bit of muscle too, or like, how do you feel on a day-to-day basis now?
I feel really good. Like I feel like I'm mentally, physically in the best shape of my life. I There's a lot of strength training that goes in with my running.
That's what I was wondering.
There's a good balance of eating the foods that I want, but also eating the right foods with
Mm-hmm.
density and nutritional value. And I feel like my decisions are not dictated by what's on the scale anymore, as opposed to what my body actually needs
Mm-hmm.
and for peak performance and for mental health. And yeah, man, best shape of my life.
Nice. Good. When people open up on the podcast and tell me about their past experiences and especially about their struggles, I always feel like I have to throw a caveat in there and like sort of explain, or at least give a nod to my struggles as well. So I never struggled so much with food, but I struggled with alcohol. I struggled with substances, and that was sort of my big demons that I had to wrestle with to get to where I am today. Um, Now, where the hell was I going with that? I don't remember. But um, yeah, man. So, all right, I completely lost my train of thought there. So, okay, what was your first ultra marathon? Was that during the COVID lockdown,
Uh,
or when was that?
it was kind of the in between after the first lockdown, and it was the end of 2020.
Okay.
So most of the ultra races on the West Coast or closer to the West Coast were happening in Utah in the fall of 2020. So the first ultra marathon I signed up for was the Zion 50K.
Hmm.
Uh, I committed to my first 100 miler, which was the Zion 100 for April of 2021. I signed up for that in July. And then I signed up for the Zion 50K. So again, it's that recurring theme of like, I'm going to set this big goal that's going to make me sweat bullets. Like, what did I just do? And then have to figure out the rest from there.
Mm-hmm.
So my first
Mm-hmm.
ultra marathon was the Zion 50K, and that was definitely an ordeal that I'll never forget as well.
Yeah, tell me about that. Like, I want to hear about like the highs and the lows, and what was that like?
I think the high first off for me was definitely like that 15 to 20 mile where I just realized like I'm doing this thing, like I'm out here doing this ultra marathon. And I just PR'd like um, after the 23 miles going into 24 and realizing that like my longest long run up to that point was like 23 miles 3 weeks before, and realizing that I just PR'd that and now I'm going into like this uncharted territory and that I was a winner for
Yeah.
it. And then the lows
Yeah.
sort of were like self-created. Like there's a lot of like, it was very hard to like meet other ultra runners in the pandemic. And I also didn't know where to begin with my research, because it's like, how do you, how does a total rookie at like ultras realize, like, what do you look up when you want to, when you need to figure out that you need electrolytes? Like, how do you know to look up salt tabs? How do you know to look up like pickles, or how do you know to look up certain things like that? So I didn't have any electrolytes whatsoever during that race. I was wearing the total wrongest socks, and I had blister issues all over my feet. I fell at mile 26 and I ended up just laying on the ground for about 5 minutes because I erupted into like Charlie horses to the point where like 10, 15 runners were stopping to check on me. One of them actually gave me like their energy chews. And that was also my first run-in with how amazing the community is. But that mile 26 to that mile 31 took at least 2.5 hours. I was just death marching to the finish line. But it got done. It was a memorable experience.
My 50K wasn't too far off from that either, man. I mean, like I wasn't quite ready for it, but I was as ready as I was going to get, you know, and I just went out there and suffered through it and loved every minute of it and started thinking about my first 50 miler. So, all right. So you made it through 50K. Was the next step a 50 miler? Oh no, you signed up for a 100 miler.
Yeah, so I never actually ended up doing a 50 miler or a 100K. I just did several other 50Ks leading up to my 100 miler.
Nice.
So I ended up doing February 2021 was when I did my second 50K, because there was a kind of that stoppage of like races in between when they had like that massive surge in like 2020. Races started opening up in California on technicalities, like it's on Indian reservations, and they were like smaller, more simple events that were treated as like group runs. And I did my second 50K, and that was where I met my coach, Heather Catchpole. And we ended up running the entire thing together, and about halfway through it, I ended up asking her to be my coach because I had no idea what I was doing. I'd Googled certain things, and I cranked out multiple 20-mile long runs and long back-to-back long runs. But as far as like speed workouts and hill repeats and nutrition, I had no clue. And I'd already committed to doing, after that second ultra, I'd committed to doing 3 more 50Ks in my last 2 months of my training block. And so she sort of wrapped everything nicely around those races and got me prepared for the April Zion 100.
Okay. And was that a sufferfest, or were you feeling more prepared for that, or what did that one look like?
That one was also a sufferfest. Again, my path is like anything but unconventional. Like I would definitely be the last person to say like do a 50K and go straight to a 100. I would say go do a 50 mile or go do a 100K. But everyone's story is different. I ended up finishing that race DFL, dead fucking last, with 2 minutes left. I had all kinds of issues during that race. I had GI issues with dairy, which ended up making me turn to fully plant-based from vegetarian a few months later, which is a whole nother thing. I ended up hurting my ankle to the point where I couldn't put weight on it in the last 20 miles. And I was suffering on it for the second half of the race. I ended up getting horrific blisters on my feet. My feet were like raw sausages. I had blood blisters on my pinky, like on my pinky toe that had to be, the medic basically gave me a syringe and he told me it's going to fill up again. You need to drain it again. And I remember sitting there and he was like, man, that's a lot of blood, bro. You're a rock star. But I think more than anything during that race, that the finish was probably the best finish I've ever had in all of the races I've done up to this point, which is like 4 100-mile finishes. Out of all of them, this is still my favorite one.
Even though you were DFL, your last place, and it was your favorite one, was it the feeling of accomplishment, or why would you say that was your favorite one?
It was the feeling of being at mile 96 and the map was telling me that, or it was the feeling of being at mile 98 and the map telling me that you still have 4 miles to go and you only have 40 minutes to do it. And for the first time thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. And walking around stumbling on one of the last loops out in the heat, out of water, just thinking of like, man, like mixed feelings. Like I'm still gonna finish this thing even if I don't make it, even if it's past 36, because 100 miles is 100 miles. But
Yep.
also like coming up with excuses for all the time I just committed and couldn't get it done. And that was when my friend Rob Rich, who was the aid station captain of the last aid station, was kind of getting ready to sweep that area of the course. And a runner ahead had said that I was coming. Amazing trail community again. And he and his daughter told me that I was actually only 2 miles away from the finish, and the map was wrong. And so they came behind me and they started pacing me, and they were just wrapping up the aid station, and they said, do you want us to stay here? Do you want us to come with you? And I said, I would rather you guys run to the finish with me because you helped me get to this point. And so Rob, his daughter, and one of his other friends, they all ran me into the finish line. And I remember them saying, like, you got to give it everything you got, because I only had a few minutes to spare. And up until that point, the last 30 miles, I was doing like 25-minute miles. I mean, the first 50 miles that I raced took me 14 hours. The last 50 took me 22 hours. So
Yep.
I just remember sprinting at what was like a 10-minute pace, and just like running, like just giving it everything I got. At that point I said, like, forget my legs. Like, if this is the last thing I have to do, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And I just remember crossing that finish line. And when I was behind that finish line, I thought this is like my swan song. Like, this is my big thing in life. And then when I crossed that finish line, I immediately knew it was only the beginning.
Damn.
And
Dude, I got goosebumps. I got
and
goosebumps just listening to that.
Well, if you think that's wild, it's the text that Rob sent me after the race that gave me chills. He said, like, you changed my life, you changed my daughter's life. And he said, thanks for showing my daughter and my family that you always fight till the end, no matter what the result is, to just be a fighter. It doesn't matter what the result is. It's about the process. Thank you for showing us how to be a fighter. And I'll never forget that text. And I've kind of held that mentality with me the whole way. It's not about where I end up, as long as I give it everything I got and I fight till the final bell.
That's beautiful. And you probably learned so much about yourself that day and your own personal strength and resolve. And you couldn't have learned that from 1,000 books, every book in the library. You know, you couldn't have learned that from the greatest teachers at Harvard and Yale. You might have been able to hear that, but you wouldn't have really known it or understood it. And you're never going to forget that day. You will be on your deathbed thinking back to the greatest times in your life, and that day will be one of them.
That will be one of them. Absolutely.
That's awesome, man. That is so cool. It's hard to top that, you know, and you've done 3 more hundreds since then. And that might be the one for a long, long time. Yeah. And just looking at your Instagram, and again, you are running for this foundation, this charity, which is honorable, and it's really cool. And it looks like later this year, you're doing ultra in Peru, one in Iceland, and the Moab 240. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm in 3 weeks, I'm going to Peru for a 5-day stage race. That'll be about 140 miles through the rainforest, kind of like self-supported, like the Marathon des Sables.
Okay.
And then the Iceland thing is just me sending it on another dream, which is I've always wanted to through hike countries from border to border, and Iceland was the one that kind of popped up for the time of the year, and decided that I want to hike the 300 miles of the Icelandic Traverse from south to north, and just have that little adventure and see how that goes, and use it as part of my Moab training. And then October is my big dance for the year, which is the Moab 240, which I'm also doing for all of these for Richstone.
Mm.
And one other thing that I found out for the Moab 240 is that if I finish the race, I'll be the first runner representing India to finish that race.
Wow, that's pretty big. Well, that's really cool, man. I mean, God, what a slacker you are. I mean, throw some bigger races in there, why don't you?
Yeah.
That's really cool, man. So you've got your whole year mapped out. I'm just curious, like, where do you see this going in 5 or 10 years? Do you think that far ahead? Do you still want to be running, or are you just putting everything into this year and then we'll see what happens next year?
Well, so this is all preparation for next year. 2023, I am doing the Cocodona 250, and I'm also doing the Triple Crown of 200s. I guess the informal name that they call that is the Grand Slam of 200s. So I'm going for 4 200s in the calendar year, and I guess technically 5 in a full year if you count that I'm doing Moab twice.
What do you mean? What, you're doing Moab twice?
I'm doing the Moab 240 in 2022, but I also have to do the Moab.
Oh, gotcha.
23. So,
yep.
4 200s in 23, and then I have these plans that I'm trying to work around of like eventually living my Forrest Gump moment and running across the U.S. and kind of also running across India to raise awareness of the sport as well. That'll be 24, 25. We'll see how that goes.
Okay. This is probably a stupid question that I should know, but geographically, what's larger, the US or India?
The US for sure.
US. Okay.
Depending on which of the ways you do it. If you do India from north to south, it's about 2,500 miles. There's some directions you could do the US, which is about the same as well. So,
yeah.
But yeah, as far as like which route I'm going to take, in the US traverse, not sure yet, no idea.
Okay.
India, it'll be from the north point where Kashmir is to the south point, the south tip of India near Kanyakumari. They call it the K to K. So yeah, we'll just that's pretty much again, it's the whole like, let's have this idea and then we'll figure out the rest later.
Yeah, man. That's the best way to do it, in my opinion. Just sign up for it and then just figure it out along the way.
Yeah. And to me, it's not about, how it ends up. It's not about the achievement. I have this saying that I'd rather fail big than win small. And I just know that me just going out there, doing my thing, and people knowing my story and seeing me go out and do those things is going to at least change one life. Like, to me, it's not about being that person who changes the world. It's about being that person who becomes a catalyst for that person who might end up changing the world. It could be one of those kids. It could be somebody who's watching this podcast. It could be somebody who has just seen one of my posts, having that sort of impact.
Yeah. You never know who you're going to impact, man. It's that ripple effect. I'm going to post this online and it's going to be there until there's no more internet, so 50 years from now, someone might listen to this and be super inspired by it. And it might be a game changer for them. We're going for another story that I've said on the podcast before, but one of my biggest inspirations was this guy I'd never met in my life. When I was a kid, we used to see this guy running all over the place, and he'd be running through town with his shirt off, and he was always really tan and skinny. And we always just kind of thought, man, this guy must be crazy. Like, what's he doing out doing all this running? But I always saw him and I always thought, it always just stayed in my mind, I guess. And then we'd be driving out in the country and we'd see the same guy. He's just like 20 miles out from town out there running all by himself. And it wasn't necessarily inspirational to me at the time, but when I started running, my mind went back to that guy. And I'm like, man, I wonder who that dude was. I bet you he was some badass marathon guy, and I don't even know who he was. And it was a huge inspiration for me,
Yeah, definitely.
You just never know who's watching.
Yeah, you never know going back to how you're just like providing encouragement to, you know, that guy who just gets out the door who might be overweight doing that thing. Like you never know what one simple action might do for somebody. Like even if it's a
Mm-hmm.
thumbs up, that person might 5 years from now be like this badass and be like, I'll never forget that guy who I later found out was Adam who gave me that thumbs up on the road, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that changed my life,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yep. Yep. I love all that stuff, man. I love it. Okay, so you're doing a 100 miler tomorrow. The same old 100. Is that what you said it's called?
Yep. It's
Okay.
short for Santa Monica
Okay.
100.
Okay. Um, and are you just kind of using this as a training run, or do you have more 100 milers peppered throughout the year?
So I'd kind of done I'd done the Antelope 100 in March, which is a DNF. I did the Zion 100 in April 4 weeks ago, which was I finished that one. And then I'm just doing the same old. So it's kind of just like training runs, but also just kind of feeling my body out and just seeing what I can do and how much, how like just step by step, kind of seeing like, hey, my body recovered pretty good from this. I wonder what would happen if I do a couple of these. But right now, I would say if there's any one main focus, it's on building volume and time on feet, which is going to be important for the Moab 240 and for the Grand Slam of 200s is time on feet.
Totally. Totally. What does your training normally look like? What did your training look like leading up to this 100?
So leading up to this one, because I've had basically 3 100-mile attempts in 3 months, there was a lot of, it was very intuitive of like that first week after you finish the 100, just feeling your body out and see how it goes and just
Right.
eating like it's your job and doing recovery. And after that, it was sort of just doing the miles that feel comfortable, kind of having to range between 40 to 60 and then just kind of like going at that for a couple weeks and going into kind of like a mini taper of like 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Last year when I had less races, it was definitely more of like larger training blocks where I peak my mileage at 85 to 90. And now it's more about just like feeling my body out in between these races because there's such a huge volume of races and not being afraid of not comparing myself to others in terms of mileage, because that's a trap that other people fall into. You'll see guys going out and doing 100-mile weeks. You'll see some guys doing like 50, 40, doing just as good. And it's just all about figuring out your own body and not being afraid to step on the bike when I need to, not being afraid to like focus on strength work and mobility and yoga when I need to, and just doing the miles that feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's smart, man. You got to find that balance. And it's easy when you're a newer ultra runner to fall in love with the sport and just start falling really hard in love with it and going out and running way too many miles. Like I've fallen into that trap. You get injured, then you're down for a few months, and then you got to figure out where that balance is going to be.
Yeah. And
So it sounds like
I have to emphasize again how important strength training and mobility have been for me, especially single-legged strength work, even just like 10, 15 minutes a day of doing like body weight stuff or like resistance band, kettlebell stuff, and just hip openers, like just 5, 10 minutes a day. That stuff has made a huge difference compared to like not doing it at all.
Yeah, 100%. Well, anybody who's listening to this, take that advice, because I have been seeing PTs lately for an injury, and they're just giving me the exercises that I should have been doing all along. So listen to the man right here. Well, cool, man. And if someone's listening to this and they want to donate to the foundation that you're running for, how would we do that?
There's 2 ways to donate. You can find it on Instagram at the Aum Gandhi. And there's also a QR code on that Instagram that can be scanned to go to the GoFundMe page. We have a GoFundMe page that's very easy to Google. It's called For the Kids 2022 Richstone Fundraiser.
Okay. And And you said you're trying to raise a big amount of money. And is that through the end of this year, or when are you, is there like a date that you're trying to raise that money by?
The goal is by the end of this calendar year is when I'm
Calendar
trying to
year.
raise money by the 25,000.
Okay, sweet. So you got some big stuff between now and then, man. I mean, talk about do big things, right? It's,
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Um, cool, man. Well, this is a fun conversation. Like I sense a certain amount of determination with you. And though you're a somewhat new ultra runner, only within the past few years, like I just sense that you're really determined. You have this resolve, and it is what it is. You're just going to go out and you're going to do this. And that's just, it's as simple as that. And I respect that and I admire that. And, you know, some people come on the show and it feels like they're doing this for a show or to impress somebody, or and then you also get the feeling like, oh, I don't know if they're going to do it because it seems like they're doing it for the wrong reasons, and it doesn't feel like that with you. So good luck, dude. Hang in there. I think you're going to have, this is going to be the best year of your life, you know, and next year might be better than that, but just enjoy it, because like we said earlier, you know, you may be on your deathbed and you'll be thinking back, and these are the times you're going to be thinking of.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anything else we missed? Anything else we can cover or point people in a certain direction or anything like that before we close this out?
No, I think we hit all the nails. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, come back anytime, dude. We'll be keeping an eye on you. And after you destroy some of these big races, I'm going to want to hear about them. So we'll have to have you back on.
Yeah, man, that sounds so good. This is a fun conversation, and thanks for having me on.
Anytime, I appreciate it, man. Have a great day and good luck tomorrow. And yeah, go get after it, dude.
Yeah, same to you. Have a great day, Adam.
Thanks, man. Take care.
You too.